morning. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the Shadow of the Gods. This is an arc I received. This is coming out May 4th, so tomorrow, as you guys are watching this, the Shadow of the Gods is released, and I wanted to talk a little bit about it, see if it's worth your while in purchasing. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is I have never read anything by John Gwynne before, so this is going to be my first journey into his work. And I just wanted to state that. So I don't really have anything to liken it to as of yet. But in saying that, I will say I did enjoy this so much that I will be delving into other works of his. So this is a story that centers around Norse-inspired mythology. So it's a Norse-inspired fantasy that takes place in a fantastical world. We're following three characters, Orca, Varg, and Alvar. The names. I will say the biggest struggle I had in this book was quietly trying to pronounce the names out loud so it could really stick in there. So we're following a huntress who's trying to find her son. We're also following Elvar, who is a noblewoman, following a gang of people that are looking for their sort of bright light as warriors. And we're also following a thrall who is trying to wrap his head around the circumstance of his sister's murder and also seek revenge. So that's the premise of the overall book. Where the story is set, we are living in a world that is very like Vikings-ish. It's very like barbaric, I think would be the word. We're in a world that all of the old gods have died. So there was one reigning god that had a bunch of kids. The reigning god having had a wolf son, a dragon, a bear. So all of these like very proud and rich animals. This is the god's children. The god's children all ganged up, and in a twist of betrayal and jealousy, all of the gods have wound up dead. The only rumored god to have survived was Liftraftka, which is the dragon that you see on the cover. The rumor being that the dragon was tricked into being trapped into a mountain by his sister and unfortunately fell into that trap and lay there for many centuries, sort of waiting to be reborn or let free in some way. I will say this, what I loved about this book was the character work. I loved the world in which it was set. It was so different and so fun. And I really love anything pertaining to dragons or gods in any way, shape, or form. So that was definitely a bonus. And if you like that sort of fantasy, I would really suggest this one. Things that I was maybe not the biggest fan of was some characters I connected with right away. Their story and the pacing was just fantastic. I would say Okra is like that. I would say Vlarg is like that. However, Elvar, it took a long time to get invested into her story, and I don't think that's the fault of the author. I do think this is book one in a series, and I just think it should be known that it certainly reads like book one in a series, which is there is not a lot of payoff for some characters until the very end of the book, which of course is the setup into book two, which will continue on the series. It's the hook that the author wrote to kind of keep you reading. That being said, I do think it is sacrificed Elvar's story in this book a little bit because there is such a long buildup. Unfortunately, it made her chapters, I would say until 3/4 of the book, kind of feel like a slug that you have to read through as you're reading between Okra and Varg. You just have to like slug through the chapters that are Elvar. There are a couple of interesting things that happen, but in general, her story really doesn't pick up until like the last quarter of the book, which is unfortunate because once it does pick up, it's great. I just think it could have used a little more meat. So great bones of a story, but just a little more meat on the bones to kind of keep the audience enraptured. But I don't think that will be a problem once we get into book two. I think the author set off and on a really good note, and Elvar is going to wind up having one of the most interesting stories to date. That being said, one thing I really want to talk about is the character Okra. I go into it a little bit more in my reading vlog. I filmed a spoiler filled reading vlog read-along for this book. But I did want to make a note here that I will say Okra is one of the more fun female warrior characters that I've read in a long time. I liken her to Brienne from Game of Thrones. If you certainly in the show, but definitely in the book, there's a lack of femininity with these two warriors in general, but specifically Okra. I love when we have female warriors that are stripped of their traditional female qualities, and they really inhabit what it means to be a warrior. And Okra is certainly that. Even though she is maternal, it's not in such a way that we're used to. She takes on the traditionally fatherly role, whereas her partner Thorkel takes on the more maternal aspects of the paired partnership for parenthood. So I thought that was really interesting, and it only comes to flourish later on with her as she needs to journey to find her son. So really interesting. I had so much fun with this book. So this book is, at least the art, 478 pages. It did not feel like that at all. Honestly, I felt like it read maybe 200, 250. That's how much I enjoyed myself. At no point, I sectioned it off so I wasn't blowing through it too quickly, but by section 2, I just wound up reading the rest of it all in one go, because something kicks off and it just hooks you right in, and it's hard to stop flipping through the pages. And I will say, for high epic fantasy, that's quite hard to come by. Where I love fantasy and the world building and how in-depth character arcs can become and how in-depth journeys and worlds are created, page turning is kind of hard to find in high fantasy, because most authors are so focused on building an in-depth world and in-depth characters. But this one, I think John Gwynne found a really great balance between the two and was able to really balance out intrigue and world development and do it sort of spanning across the entire novel instead of an info dump initially. So those are my thoughts on The Shadow of the Gods. I would definitely recommend you picking up. I would say if you enjoyed Rage of Dragons, sort of Evan Winter style of writing, if Vikings or Norse mythology interests you whatsoever, I think you would also enjoy this. But even I would say, in terms of a dragon story, without getting too much in depth of the world of the gods in this, because it is really interesting to discover through the storytelling, because that is how they sort of info dump in here, is through mouth-to-mouth historical storytelling. I will say there is a certain amount of intrigue for me when it comes to like high fantasy and gods being attached to that, and certainly gods in the more animalistic sense. So if you also have interest in that, I would definitely recommend. It is released May 4th, so I will put links in the description of where you can purchase, and I hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm so interested to see what other people think of this, because I think this is going to be a hit. So that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video for the read-along of Shadow of the Gods.